Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Monday, May 14th, 2018. I am Dave Biddle, very happy to be joined by Patrick Murphy. And Patrick, I wanted to mix it up today and not talk about the quarterbacks. With that being said, let's talk about the quarterbacks. There's really not that much going on in Buckeye Nation right now, and the quarterback conversation is still dominating the front row message board. We'll steer the conversation in a different direction later in the show, but I do want to start off talking about Joe Burrow specifically. When I heard that he was looking at two schools, Cincinnati and LSU, I was thinking, well, that'd be great for Luke if Luke Fickell can go to UC, but man, LSU makes a lot of sense to me. But Bill Kurelic is hearing that it sounds like UC is the more likely destination for Joe Burrow. I mean, if that does materialize, your thoughts on that, Patrick?
Yeah, I was surprised as well, when we first got word that Joe was indeed transferring, and then he makes the announcement. Obviously, there were a lot of different programs mentioned. LSU, Cincinnati were both included in that, but schools like Florida, UCLA, some people speculated maybe Texas with Tom Herman, obviously Nebraska because of the family connection. And then, we hear that he's going to visit Cincinnati and LSU over the weekend, or late last week and over the weekend, which he did. And, I was a little surprised that those were the first two. Obviously, LSU has been in need of a quarterback for quite some time, using Danny Etling, the former Purdue quarterback, the past couple of years, to some success. So that made sense. But Cincinnati just surprised me a little bit, not a major program in a major Power 5 conference. I thought he would want to go to a school like that to really show that he can compete at that level. But, if that is indeed where he ends up, he's still relatively close to home, stays in Ohio, and, probably has a good chance to play there. I believe that, maybe he's thinking more of a comfort thing in that case. But, obviously you mentioned Luke Fickell. That could be something to a connection there. So interesting for sure because, like I said, I thought maybe more of a major Power 5 school. Certainly there's a lot of suitors out there, but I guess we also don't know what conversations have been like behind the scenes. Maybe some schools weren't as willing to promise him what he wanted to hear and stuff like that. A lot of speculation at this point, but Cincinnati was a surprising one, and then to hear that might be the front runner was even a little more surprising. So I'm interested to see what comes out here whenever Joe does make his decision, and see what kind of information we get from him when he does make the call.
Yeah, it could come down at any moment, to give the listeners a peek behind the curtain. We were on Burrow Watch yesterday, just in case he made the decision yesterday. That did feel like it'd be kind of quick. I mean, he was just coming off. I mean, he was still on his LSU visit as of yesterday, but, I think it ended midday yesterday. So we were on Burrow Watch yesterday, so it really could come down at any moment. At least that's how we're looking at it. Before I move on to ask you about Dwayne Haskins, it is interesting. If Burrow does go to Cincinnati, I mean, the Buckeyes don't play him this year, but they do play him in 2019, so as a fifth-year senior,
yep.
We could have Joe Burrow against, assuming Dwayne Haskins isn't going to be like one and done as a starting quarterback, and I don't think he will be. I think he's going to be really good, but I think he's going to be back as a fourth-year junior. He'll have at least 2 years as the starting quarterback at Ohio State. But that's pretty intriguing, Patrick, if that does materialize. That's going to be Burrow playing against the Buckeyes in 2019.
Absolutely. I think most people thought that the only way that would happen would be either if he went to Nebraska or if, he went somewhere and the Buckeyes ran into him in a bowl game or a college football playoff game. But, I think that the fact that he could come into Ohio Stadium and play once again is very interesting. We're in the business of storylines. That would certainly be a storyline. Obviously a year removed, he would have a year at Cincinnati to ideally win the spot and be a quarterback for the year. And then he's comfortable, comes into Ohio Stadium with certainly something to prove. And, we've, seen programs like that come in here and those guys, maybe didn't get offered by Ohio State or whatnot. There's always a little bit of that coming from those games. But now there's a guy who was at Ohio State, was a guy who played quarterback here, backing up J.T. Barrett, and then potentially comes in as the starter at Cincinnati with a chance to beat the Buckeyes. I don't know how often that type of thing happens, but from a writing perspective, I think that's pretty interesting. And then, Obviously what happens if Cincinnati is able to pull an upset, or if Joe Burrow just is able to have a really good game against the Buckeyes, obviously then you can start asking some questions about whether the right decision was made. But that's a ways off. We still have to see, but certainly intriguing if that does happen down the road.
This is the first time I've had you on the show since, this decision has been, I guess you can call it a decision. I don't know if Meyer really said Haskins as a starter. I bet you anything that he did at least say Dwayne has a slight lead. I bet he said, because these guys aren't stupid. There's no way it was 50-50. They chart everything over there. One guy had to be a little bit ahead of the other. So I imagine it was a decision to some degree. I think Urban wanted both guys to stick around. But, as you look at Dwayne Haskins being the starting quarterback now, what are your expectations for him for 2018? What are your reasonable expectations for Dwayne Haskins as the starting quarterback this season?
I think we should probably temper those a little bit. If I go back to last year, obviously Dwayne comes out in that first game against Army, 4 for 4, looks good. Then the next game against UNLV, has a bunch more playing time, throws his first touchdown, looks very good. But as the season went on and the sample size got bigger, we did see some risky throws by Dwayne, some young, inexperienced decisions. Obviously, then we go down to the end of the season and he comes in against Michigan and looks like a guy who was very poised and has been doing this all his life. So I think you're going to get a mixed bag of that, and especially early in his first year. You go back to when J.T. Barrett came in as a redshirt freshman. There were bumps in the road at the beginning of that 2014 season before he calmed down and kind of settled in. Obviously, Dwayne's a little further along in his career, but still, not many games under his belt, not a ton of experience. The pressure's going to be a little bit different as the starter than a guy coming in. I do think Dwayne's a great talent, obviously a great arm. You saw that in the Michigan game, what he can do. But, I've heard people really setting the bar high and, ranking him among, some of the top quarterbacks in the country and things like that. And I think, let's wait and see what he can do. This is a very talented team. He's going to have a lot of weapons around him. I do think his ability to stretch the field is going to help the Buckeyes. I think the coaching staff is going to have to cater the offense towards him, get the running backs more involved as runners, as we've talked about before, and use these receivers as weapons. But, I think, there may be some mistakes. Dwayne seems like a guy as a quarterback that's willing to take a little bit more risks because he has a lot of confidence in that arm, as he should. And so, there could be some turnovers that maybe we didn't see the last few years under J.T. Barrett. But you also are going to get the benefit of, that big play potentially at any moment with some of these athletes. So, I think it could be a little bit of a mixed bag if he settles in and gets really comfortable. The good news is now that, the job we assume is set and it's his, he's got all summer to work with Ryan Day, work with these receivers, work with, new center and Brady Taylor to get that comfort level as high as you can from practice, and then obviously leading into fall camp, and then when we start the season. So I expect him to have a pretty good season next year. I'm not willing to put him in the Heisman conversation yet or anything like that, even though I've seen him listed as one of the, not necessarily favorites, but given the odds. But yeah, I expect good things. I do think that maybe it could be a little slow at first, like it is with a lot of guys.
And moving away from quarterback, as everybody cheers, who didn't want to hear about quarterbacks, what's maybe like another position group that you're focused on, maybe a position battle? Like you mentioned center, Brady Taylor. I feel like he's got the job, and I like Josh Myers a lot. He's going to be a redshirt freshman. I think it's Brady Taylor's job this year, and it's good to have Josh Myers. But some people think Myers can push Taylor for that job. Just maybe a position group that you're kind of looking at. We're like now exactly a month removed from spring ball. The spring game was April 14th. We're sitting here on May 14th. What's maybe a position group you're looking at?
Well, there's a couple. I'll talk about one on each side of the ball. The offensive side, not necessarily position battle, but I did just kind of touch on it, is the running backs. And I'm really interested to see what the breakdown is going to be between J.K. Dobbins and Mike Weber, because when Mike was healthy last year, I thought the coaches still struggled to figure out how best to use these two. J.K.'s touches were significantly more. Do we see that again this year? Is he the clear starter, or is it more of a split backfield with them, with the touches being more even? Do they use them situationally, to accentuate their skills? And then, how they are impacted by Dwayne Haskins being the quarterback. To me, as I said a few minutes ago, that seems like there's more carries for the running backs. I do think the quarterback run is still a part of this offense. It's an Urban Meyer offense after all, but I don't think you'll see it nearly as much. I think the staff, obviously it's a little bit of a different staff now, but they made that mistake with Cardale trying to fit him into an offense that they'd run with J.T. Barrett, and I don't think they can afford to do that with Dwayne. So how do the running backs kind of complement what Dwayne can do in the passing game? How are those carries split up? I think you want to keep both of those guys happy. And then, do you get a Master Teague in there? Obviously, they were very happy with him in the spring. So I'm just interested to see what the breakdown will be at running back. Obviously, we know the pecking order there. But then the defensive side of the ball, to me, it's about linebacker. And I'm actually writing something for today. What do they do to get the production there? We saw that position struggle for a lot of the season. Tuff Borland came in and helped settle that as a true middle linebacker a little bit. Now we don't know how long Tuff Borland's going to be out after the Achilles injury. So, where do they go there? Obviously, they've got a couple options in Justin Hilliard and Baron Browning. But, how long is Tuff out? And then, if he's out, who do they go with there? And then what's it going to look like on either side? What's going to happen with Dante Booker? If he does return, can he be the linebacker that they recruited out of high school, or is he, going to be a guy who just kind of was middle of the road at Ohio State? Obviously, he's got 1 year left. There just seems to be a lot of questions at those positions, and that seems to be the biggest position of need on the Buckeye defense after last season. So, that's an area that I think they really need to improve in. They have the opportunity with Chris Worley and Jerome Baker gone. There's two holes there to fill that. Malik Harrison obviously seems to be one of those guys. But, I think if that's not a significantly improved position group on the defense, then Ohio State could be in a little bit of trouble again next year if teams can exploit them like they did a year ago. So I'll be interested to see how those guys are improving and what the setup looks like at linebacker.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Patrick. That's the one I'm looking at the most is linebacker. It's not just one of the spots, as you mentioned, as you outlined. It's all three spots. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there. And it's not just intriguing. It's definitely my biggest concern on the team, offensively or defensively, is the linebacking position. So we'll see what happens. Great insights, as always, from my guy, Patrick Murphy. Thank you very much, Patrick, and thanks to all the listeners out there for tuning in to the show. I appreciate it, and hope you have a great day. Let's hear that Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.